making sure he has enough authority to push Kyle as the next king. This man doesn't care what it takes. In fact, he's even willing to face off against the other ministers if needed. And so, as time passed, Dunan slowly garnered power for the hunting expedition team, and the power balance kept shifting towards the hunting team. 6 months went by like a gentle breeze, and King Anpyong removed Basan Lak Orazan as crown prince, replacing him with Kyle. Just 3 years later, King Anpyong passed away from a terminal illness, and Kyle Lak Orazan became Hukrin's 11th king. The funny thing is, he's only 15 years old, probably making him the youngest king in history. Not long after, Basan is seen greeting the new king with utmost respect, which causes Kyle a wave of embarrassment, seeing his older brother addressing him with such a formal title. He insists on dropping the formalities whenever it's just the two of them. But Basin believes that the supreme king of the greatest nation on the continent deserves at least this much respect. Anyway, tomorrow will be the first royal meeting under Kyle's reign, and Basan is sure everyone will suggest kicking him out of the palace. And that's exactly what's weighing Kyle down right now. You see, Hukrin is a nation where the ministers hold a lot of power. Since most of them are Lizardmen nobles, the scales tend to tip heavily in one direction. Those shady Lizardmen ministers will definitely try to boot Basan out of royal authority, just so they can seize more control and overpower the new king's influence. But honestly, Basan isn't all that worried about being excluded from court. In fact, he's more afraid that he might end up holding Kyle back if he stayed in court. Not to mention, there really isn't any formal role in the court that a former crown prince like him can fill. He's actually planning to widen his horizons and go far this time, to catch some bigger prey. The mention of hunting sparks some ideas in Kyle's head as he gazes at the sky. He's got the perfect job in mind for Basan and is sure his big brother will be into it. Just like that, he fills Basan in on all the juicy details of the job. The next day rolls around, and Kyle officially begins the royal meeting. As the new king, he's hoping to win everyone's support. Since he doesn't have any major announcements, he opens the floor for the ministers to speak and raise any issues. As expected, one of the Lizardmen ministers steps forward and proposes ousting Prince Basan from the palace. He argues that since Basan used to be the crown prince and is close to Kyle, he holds more sway in the courtroom than any minister. Anyone with ill intentions toward the king could approach Basan and influence royal decisions behind the scenes. Surprisingly, Kyle agrees with the core of their argument. He understands their concern. Even ministers of other races are bewildered, especially since they expected Kyle to oppose the suggestion entirely. Emboldened by Kyle's response, the Lizardmen go further and suggest sending Prince Basan out of the capital, Orazan. But this time, Kyle flat out refuses. He's actually annoyed that a minister would even suggest something that's clearly the king's prerogative. Instead, Kyle points toward the untouched lands lying in the eastern mountains. Historically, many kings have sent expeditions that way, but the steep, jagged terrain has always made those efforts a disaster. Most people don't even think the eastern mountains are worth it, but with 5 nations threatening from the west, Kyle knows he can't afford to miss any chance to expand their territory. So yeah, what Kyle really wants is to send Prince Basan to the eastern mountains, much to the minister's shock. Without a doubt, Basan is an outstanding hunter and a damn good warrior. The fact that he hunted down Manun alone only proves that further. The ministers start murmuring among themselves. Some say the mountains have nothing of value. Others argue that the land beyond them isn't all that vast. But hey, not like they have enough authority to override the supreme king anyway, so they reluctantly agree it's a good idea. With that settled, the next step is building a sailing crew. Turns out Kyle's plan involves boats. Every past attempt to cultivate the East failed because they tried crossing by land. So yeah, this change in approach might actually give them a better shot, taking boats around to the far side of the mountains. One minister objects, saying there aren't any known sea routes, so land is safer. But Kyle has already considered that. That's exactly why they'll be building a sea route. It's been years already. Kyle doesn't want to waste any more time before exploring that untouched land. The lizard minister goes on highlighting more complications they might face while sailing. But don't worry, our guy Kyle has thought it all through. This lizard bastard seems to have run out of objections and still hasn't been able to make Kyle budge. Meanwhile, Kyle is clearly getting exasperated at how this dude keeps whining before things have even started. Since exploring uncharted territory involves threats like monsters and wild beasts, it makes sense to assign the hunting minister some responsibilities too. Dunnan has no objections to his new task. But then there's that one lizard. What was his name again? Oh yeah, Minister Salusin. This zesty-ass bastard just has to complain about everything. With all that settled, Kyle moves on to the next topic of the meeting. This one involves someone who's been waiting outside all this time, and they're finally granted entry. A dwarf, clearly down on his luck, walks in, and just his presence makes every minister lose their damn minds. They're practically fuming as if a clown just walked in to make diplomatic decisions. Solution, as usual, has a problem and questions the king about it. Kyle introduces the man. His name is Lump, and he's from the technician team. The king understands if everyone's confused about seeing this random dwarf here, especially since he was a slave until recently. But since the technique minister position is currently vacant, Kyle brought him in to fill it. Of course, every bald-headed lizard bastard is shocked out of their scales. They're all reacting like Kyle just committed blasphemy by letting a short dude walk in. Honestly, these black lizards are seriously racist. First, they're bigoted toward their own kind just for being white. And now they've got a hate boner for a dwarf. Kyle expected this exact reaction. In fact, it's part of his plan. He used this whole scene as a distraction to draw attention away from Basan. Minister Solution argues that the technique minister role has always been held by a lizardman, so it makes no sense to let a dwarf suddenly take it. Kyle claps back and calls him out for being blatantly racist. There's no law stating that only lizardmen can be the technique minister. The position is for someone skilled with their hands and knowledgeable in mechanics. Up until now, lizardmen happen to be the best at that stuff. But not this time. Kyle had personally witnessed Lump's skills. To prove his point, he asks every minister if they know the altitude of Orizon's Arctic region. The astronomy minister steps up and claims it's about 32.5 degrees. As a follow-up, Kyle asks if anyone knows the altitude of the northern tip, Jaren, and the southern tip, Maganin. Of course, silence follows. Then Lump speaks up. He claims that Jaren is 37.5 and Maganin is 30. He further explains that the altitude in the Arctic changes by 1 degree every 250 Ri. Jaren, being 1250 Ri further north, is 5 degrees higher. Maganin, on the other hand, lies 625 Ri further south, making it 2.5 degrees lower. Kyle is thoroughly satisfied with the answer, and more than a little proud that Lump gave the correct response where the lizardmen failed. But of course, that still isn't enough for Minister Salison, the bastard. He gets so pressed that he starts ranting about why Kyle even became king in the first place. According to him, it's because Kyle possesses the blood of the great Thunder Dragon King, and all the ministers here are descendants of the warriors who once fought alongside the Dragon King. That, he claims, is why dwarves were enslaved. They were enemies of the Lizardmen until the end of Hukrin. Even after the nation was formed, they were still considered likely to revolt. Kyle shuts that down quickly. He reminds them that the legendary warrior Tatar once fought 10 trolls to save halflings, and the Dragon King himself once opened the castle gates to rescue slaves. If the Dragon King could show that kind of mercy, then what's so wrong with us making one exception? Well, turns out it's still a problem. Solution is now fuming, yelling about how allowing even one non-lizardman in the council would upset the entire power dynamic. If they start endorsing this idea that anyone, regardless of race, can become a minister, the lizardmen might feel pushed out. They might even stop supporting Kyle as king. He kind of has a point, to be fair. The whole system was built on the foundation laid by lizardmen ancestors. So having someone from another race rise up the ranks is bound to shake things up. The ministers plead with Kyle to reconsider before finalizing his decision. Kyle decides to take a moment to think it over before making it official. But right now, he really wants to appoint Lump as the technique official, and expects the council to back him. Seeing Lump's undeniable talent, Solution begrudgingly agrees to make one exception. With that, Lump is officially designated as the technique official. Now comes the third topic, the upcoming solar eclipse. But before diving deep into it, let's talk about why it matters. The solar eclipse, when the sun disappears or gets covered, has long been considered a divine sign or revelation from the gods. Because of that, predicting it accurately has always been crucial for national safety and ceremony. The date of the eclipse is calculated by 3 sources: the high priest who reads the order of the night sky, the king, who makes his own estimate, and the astronomy ministry, who uses ancient calculation methods. This time, something weird happens. Minister Solution is stunned when he realizes that the 3 sets of predictions don't match up. The astronomy minister says he's double-checked his numbers using traditional methods, and he's confident. But Kyle's prediction is 4 hours ahead of what the calendar priests and astronomy ministry predicted. Solution demands a recheck. He hasn't forgotten how the dwarf made them look bad in front of everyone last time. Another blunder like that, and Kyle might grow even more favorable toward non-lizard races. For a second, the astronomy minister even entertains the possibility that maybe Kyle miscalculated. After all, their method has never failed in history, so they decide to wait for the eclipse. Minister Solution is convinced, no way is Kyle right. There's no chance that all the scholars could be wrong. If Kyle is wrong, Solution plans to use that moment to slam his decisions and publicly embarrass him. But when the predicted time by the scholars arrives, nothing happens. The solar eclipse does not occur. Lizardmen all around are sweating bullets in shock. Kyle then calmly explains that the priests and astronomy ministry were using outdated methods. It was Lump, the same dwarf they looked down on, who discovered the discrepancy and warned Kyle. That's why Kyle's calculation was different and correct. Salusin and the astronomy minister are left dumbfounded, yelling about how the great Dragon King wrote in the historical records that the skies never change. But Kyle fires back. Those books are relics. It's time we accept that even our ancestors might have been wrong. Back then, the ancients had no books to study from. They discovered and recorded knowledge by themselves, and that knowledge still holds up. But today's ministers have made zero new discoveries. They've just been parroting history for decades. Kyle then references a calendar book from the nation of Mangul. It clearly states that the movement of the skies changes over time, a clear hint that the current method is flawed. Kyle doesn't argue further. The priest in charge is told to prepare the solar eclipse ceremony again, which will certainly take place 4 hours later. Sure enough, the eclipse happens exactly when Kyle predicted. A few months later, Basan boards a ship for the first great journey of his life, a mission to explore the uncharted eastern territories. Beyond the eastern mountains lies a region that must be developed, and Basan leaving the palace is essential for Kyle's reign to expand. Basan has no complaints. In fact, he feels light, free, like the world is finally open to him. The ship he boards is called Pirate's Humiliation. 3 ships carry the 150 soldiers assigned to this expedition. Basan is the designated leader of the Eastern Exploration Team, but he's not allowed to board just any ship. Kyle made it clear that there will be select people tasked with watching over him at all times. The first potential candidate to keep an eye on Basan would be that woman from the merchant family who's traded with the royal family for a long time. Speaking of which, she comes running to him, and after he introduces her as Tiona Itimo, she greets him warmly. Basan returns the greeting and extends his hand for a handshake. By her looks, he can tell she's an elf. She reciprocates enthusiastically while pointing out that it's rare for people to actually recognize her race, since mostly lizardmen don't see much difference between humans, elves, and Nixon. To their eyes, they're all the same. Moving on, Basan decides to get along well since they'll be seeing each other for a while now. There's also something very important she wants to clear up before they continue with this relationship. No matter how noble Basan may be aboard her ship, he must follow her orders. If he doesn't like that, he's free to find another ship. Basan doesn't seem to have any problem with this rule, as long as her commands are reasonable. Honestly, Tion wasn't expecting him to agree so quickly. Anyhow, she promises to be considerate since he is her guest, as well as the leader of the exploration team. Looking around, Basan notices his belongings aren't here. Tioni assures him mate will bring his stuff soon enough. It seems Basan doesn't know this mate guy, though he finds the name rather adorable. Before the girl can explain more, the person in question stomps into the scene, towering over Basan and making him look like a puny punk. The guy seems annoyed to be summoned and wants to know who called him. Tion explains that mate isn't exactly a name but a title, because he's the first mate on the ship. Since this big guy says matey after every sentence, everyone just calls him mate. While Basan is a bit startled being in this massive presence, he isn't afraid at all. Turns out, this isn't the first time he's seen an ogre. He's seen many in the palace. Moving on, Basan greets the big guy and introduces himself. The big guy returns the greeting and gives his name as First Matey. When asked if he doesn't have a real name, Matey reveals he never liked his former name, so he got rid of it altogether. Truth be told, Basan has never seen an ogre among a ship's crew. After all, smaller crew members consume less supplies. Matey admits this but makes it clear he contributes as much as he eats, so it balances out. The fact that Matey is from Jaren on the North Shore means he's one of the ogres with higher intelligence. These ogres from the North Shore are basically traces of the god who was defeated. But over time, their intelligence started to deteriorate with each generation, so nowadays, they aren't very smart. Even in Hukrin, sensible ogres who clothe themselves are very coveted and make good workers. So it's quite surprising for Basan to meet an intelligent ogre on a ship of all places. Matey then roars at the top of his lungs to show his dominance and lack of fear. He abandoned the land because the people living there are weaklings compared to him. Now his next goal is to conquer the oceans and become the first ogre to achieve that. Basan wishes the big guy good luck, hoping he achieves his dreams soon. Afterwards, Matey heads off to carry out his duties, making sure he earns the food he's going to eat. As far as Basan is concerned, he's pretty sure this guy isn't his overseer. Tion grabs his attention again by calling him Prince, which Basan doesn't like much, so he decides to drop the honorifics, and she simply calls him Basan, though Tion isn't sure if she feels comfortable enough calling him so casually. In this case, he suggests she just call him Captain, since he's the leader of the expedition team. So yeah, Captain should work. Moving on, they talk about their first destination. As much as Basan knows, they're passing Maganin heading south, then from there going east and up along the coastline. Tioni confirms this is their general path, but their first stop will be Bavrin. It's actually the biggest port city in Danium after Orizon. This sounds like news to Basan, since he believes they have no business going to a foreign city. Tion reminds him that this ship is a merchant ship, so they have to continue trading to keep their pockets warm. She promises to fill him in on all the details later, but for now, she wants to show him where they're going to stay. As the ship sails through the endless sea, Basan kills time zoning out. His attention is soon grabbed by Tione, who finds it surprising that Basan isn't whining like a baby because of seasickness. Anyhow, Basan asks something he's been wanting to know for a while. If she's a merchant, why would she take on something as annoying as an expedition team? Well, being the merchant she is, she believes it's a deal that's bang for the buck. When the Hukrin royal family gives work, they pay well. She even received a glass-crafted item as a deposit this time. It looks like Basan doesn't realize the value of such items. As far as he remembers, he broke a few glass items in childhood. I guess that's not surprising. Someone as high status as him wouldn't understand their value. She reminds him that in Hukrin, because the craftsmanship on the glass piece is so delicate, they sell for a lot abroad. They'll be selling these in Bavrin, and in return, she intends to buy some exclusive goods from Bavrin. There are also some items the palace requested her to buy. Basan, naturally curious, asks about the list of items the palace requested. The woman in turn gets all sweaty because she spoke too much. She's actually supposed to keep the items requested a secret. But since it's Prince Basan we're talking about, she realizes there's no point in keeping secrets. So, after getting close enough, she whispers niter, which is the stuff she's supposed to buy. She's heard there's a lot of it in Mangal, and she doesn't know much, but apparently it's good for farming. Speaking of farming, Basan recalls a little ceremony where the chosen ones make thunder descend to decide if a certain field has fertile soil or not. Tione has watched that kind of ceremony too, though she was too young to appreciate it back then. Basan tries to rack his brain, trying to figure out why Kyle asked her to purchase niter in secret. Back to Hukrin. After the solar eclipse incident, Kyle officially began managing internal affairs. Those who were a threat to his authority formally resigned. He called those who supported Basan and reassured them. In the king's chamber, we see this lizard minister bowing his head gratefully, relieved he wasn't fired. Initially, he thought Kyle intended to replace some existing ministers. Since this poor guy hails from a half-decent family without a last name, it would have been easy to fire him. But Kyle doesn't seem to mind the lack of a last name. In fact, he's curious why last names are so important. The minister reveals that not having a last name means his family didn't contribute to the establishment of Hukrin, so he believes he doesn't deserve the title of minister. Kyle gives the Lizardman a different perspective on the matter. Since this man doesn't come from an influential family, it clearly shows he rose to the position of minister through his own efforts. That alone makes him more than capable. So Kyle hopes he continues his service and helps make the kingdom even better. Hearing this, the minister wells up with tears, moved by how much his king believes in him. Overcome with emotion, he vows to devote his life to his majesty and do his absolute best. With that, he bows and leaves the chamber. After this heartwarming interaction, Kyle's mood suddenly drops. The reason is that Dunnan had previously warned him that the finance minister had ulterior motives, bad ones if he has to be specific. But after that exchange, Kyle didn't notice anything hostile or suspicious from the man. He's disappointed in Dunnan for making accusations based on personal grudges. This leaves the white lizard speechless, while Kyle continues to humble him with calm but stern words. Kyle tells him to let go of past resentment and start over with a clean slate. Dunnan acknowledges his mistake and misjudgment. He drops to his knees and regretfully apologizes to Kyle. Moving on, Kyle asks about the horned alchemist from the Hui family, Hui Ravina Muel. Dunnan reports that she's already arrived at the palace. Cut to Hui Moon, an elder from the family, walking out of the palace, lost in thought about Ravina Muel. She's trying to figure out why His Majesty would summon that woman to the castle. We shift focus to the Hui family. They're the ruling house of the Automation Castle and a noble family that inherits the Margrave title. Traditionally serving in left cabinet roles, the Hui family is also a major merchant house. They're considered the most powerful among non-Lizardmen families. But with their fame comes a deep, dark curse, known as the Cursed Horns. There's a legend about an old lord of the Automation Castle who had antlers. Now it's dismissed as folklore, but those within the family know it's not just a story. Every now and then, a child is born into the Hui family with horns. These children, without exception, grow up differently. They speak to the air or develop strange, unexplainable talents. Eventually, they all descend into madness. So, their horns are cut off early, in the hopes they can live normal lives. One legend says Hui Kyung became a great merchant thanks to the horn's power. But even her end was tragic. Her lover was a lizardman named Saren Mule, so rumors started that the horned children were of mixed blood. Because of this, children with horns had the name Mule attached to them. Although no one knows how such cross-species children are possible, the rumor stuck. But the story doesn't end there. Continuing the horned legacy is Hui Ravina Mule. Like most of her family, Ravina was born and raised in the Automation Castle. treated as a cursed one due to her horns, she ran away at the age of 9. She hitched a ride on a luggage cart bound for the continent. By the time the family's mercenaries caught up, she had already entered the Alchemy Tower in Seokmyeon. The Alchemy Tower, a haven for those who study forbidden knowledge. It's also where many cursed individuals, like Ravina, end up. So in a way, it made sense for her to go there. Back in the present, as Moon stares at Ravina's horns, the girl calls her out. She's used to people staring. It doesn't bother her anymore. Moon tries to explain she wasn't staring because of judgment. It's just morbid curiosity. Moving on, we learn Ravina has been summoned because His Majesty needs an alchemist. A bit about alchemists. They deny the existence of gods and place their faith in knowledge alone. That's exactly why Moon is so tense. If Kyle is calling for an alchemist's help, it might mean his faith in the gods is wavering. And Kyle's rise to power was backed by the night sky god. She eventually asks Ravina why she even left the Alchemy Tower if she'd abandoned her family. Ravina reminds her that His Majesty summoned her. And Kyle is not someone you want to cross. Which, let's be honest, is true. But what really shocks Moon is, how the hell does this girl, living in faraway Seokmyeon, even know what Kyle is like? Even if she heard a bit of gossip, it's not like Kyle would travel all the way to the Alchemy Tower just to drag her out. Ravina responds plainly, he probably would have come if she refused. So to avoid that whole drama, she answered his call without a fuss. Moon isn't making it easy on the poor girl. But Ravina calmly reminds her that she's here because of her expertise in forbidden studies, knowledge very few people possess. Not even Moon. Moon insists it's better to be ignorant of such dangerous knowledge. But Ravina points out that King Kyle clearly doesn't agree. She pulls out a fat stack of letters she received last year. Each was filled with questions about ancient knowledge. The questions were extremely advanced, and the letters came from constantly changing addresses, so the tower assumed they were from rogue alchemists. But recently, they discovered the truth. All those letters were sent from Orizon, and in all of Hukrin, there's only one person who could send letters like that while tricking the correspondence system. Moon loses it, realizing Ravina is suggesting Kyle wrote them. But the Horn Lady doesn't flinch from the truth. His Majesty Kyle is an exceptional alchemist, and that's a fact, no matter how upsetting it might be. No one in Hukrin compares to him. Moon, on the brink of explosion, feels like Ravina's mocking Kyle, making him look like an atheist. Their argument is interrupted when the man himself enters the room. He silences Moon on the spot. The woman, meanwhile, wants Kyle to confirm whether what Ravina said is true. Kyle responds subtly, saying that just reading a few alchemy books doesn't mean his faith has wavered. Before she can press further, he orders them both to sit down. Moon reflects on the situation. Technically, being an atheist is illegal, and in other nations, you could even be beaten to death for it. But even if Kyle were a non-believer, no one could punish him. Still, it's obvious his political position would take a serious hit. Back to the main topic, Kyle apologizes to Moon for keeping this a secret from her. She can be too serious and inflexible sometimes, so he thought she would worry needlessly, which is why he didn't tell her. Though she has simmered down, she's still against the idea of him studying alchemy, which basically goes against the traditions of their ancestors. Alchemy's main fields of study are making gold and immortality pills, some of the most morbid and discouraged stuff anyone could do. But Kyle believes a person should always diversify their skills, even if it means going balls deep into some forbidden knowledge to learn. After all, it depends on the individual how they plan to use that knowledge. Moon reminds him about the law prohibiting the study of alchemy. She's not sure if the knowledge he's pursuing is worth breaking laws and traditions. To Kyle, this knowledge holds a lot of value. He gives Ravina the chance to explain everything. Apparently, there was an alchemist who lived alone deep in the northern mountains. The tower communicated with him and shared knowledge. However, one day, news from that alchemist suddenly stopped, so the tower sent someone to investigate. The tower's errand boy broke down the door of the alchemist's locked house and went inside. Sadly, the alchemist was already pushing up daisies. That death was caused by forbidden knowledge. Moon expected this much, since using forbidden knowledge is like selling one's soul to some ancient evil. But Ravina reveals the alchemist's death was a pure accident. Before he died, he thoroughly recorded what experiments and ingredients he used, which helped narrow down the cause. He had been trying to make gold, and when his experiment overheated, there was a massive explosion. That failure actually resulted in another discovery, one greater than any research the alchemist had done so far. Although the experiment was done on a minimal scale, the powder created caused an incredible explosion when ignited. He'd stored it in a lead box for safety, but the box didn't hold, it was ripped apart, and shards pierced his throat. If you think about it, what the alchemist made was basically a weapon. The unfortunate thing is, this knowledge isn't some great secret, and Kyle isn't the first to realize it. The alchemists in the tower are the cursed ones who fled from various places. Like Ravina, some are still under the influence of their nations, and those nations want them to bring the tower's knowledge back. Other nations want to prevent the spread of alchemy. In fact, Ravina has been ambushed more than 10 times on her way here. In Seokmyeon, where the alchemy tower is, she's sure their army has already conquered it completely. On paper, it seems like the current age is peaceful, but if you look closer, it's not. The prices of certain ingredients have soared, and each nation has secret facilities conducting experiments to produce a weapon called gunpowder. Kyle emphasizes the significance of such a weapon. It can destroy enemies with little to no effort. It can literally sink boats and destroy castle walls. Even a common soldier wielding it can turn the tide of war. If they succeed, there's no way they'd lose. The woman thinks for a moment, then responds. While still against the idea, she's willing to follow whatever Kyle intends, since his judgment seems to be heading in the right direction. If he needs help, she's more than willing to lend a hand. Kyle does indeed require help. The case has been financed through the hunting expedition team, but that's not enough. He also wants to use the king's personal funds. Being the finance manager, she controls those funds, but since they're his funds, she can make an exception and let him use them, especially since he asked nicely. Though she wants to know how and what he's planning to use the money for. A system notification flashes in front of Nebula. Black gunpowders. It lists all the ingredients required to make this black gunpowder. Seems like everything is going just as Nebula intended. You see, the process of alchemy and advancing skills in elixir making is tricky. The stronger the faith in society, the more scientific methods are looked down upon. The alchemy tower in Seokmyeon is the farthest known nation from Hukrin. So, if you're unlucky, you might not be able to obtain this knowledge. Hui Ravina Mule, who possesses the demonic property of probability, may have a high survival rate, but there's no certainty she can properly learn the techniques. But Nebula was lucky this time. Eldar sneaks up on him to highlight an interesting tidbit. While they're talking about alchemy and gunpowder, they're not talking about another source of power. By that power, she means magic. Alchemy and elixir making are types of science. Alchemists are scientists, and their experiments are scientific. But there's a secret that alchemists work even harder to hide, and that's demonic property. About demonic property. It's based on the game, an ancient evil discovered in relics passed down through bloodlines. Demonic properties like thunder, flames, probability, or gravity relate to powers of different attributes. The power transferred through demonic spirits is basically superpowers. When such superpowers and the knowledge of ancient relics mix, a method of manufacturing that uses even higher dimensional power emerges, and that's called magic. Magic, unlike science, can only be used by a small fraction of people. People like Ravina, who possess demonic properties, has potential to become a mage. Since the alchemy tower is home to cursed individuals, it's likely that those alchemists also have demonic properties. Currently, there are no mages yet. Eldar agrees. Normally, they appear around 100 years after the game begins. The power of magic is definitely strong, but since players prefer stable gameplay, they likely keep their distance from demonic properties. Since the alchemy tower is in Seokmyeon, Eldar guesses Wisdom will get a mage. Nebula shares the same thoughts, given the probability of a mage appearing is highest there. But Nebula is sure Wisdom probably wouldn't want a mage to appear on his land. Cut to Basan and his expedition party. They've finally docked at Bavrin. The place is lively, with many boats already docked, much to Basan's amazement. But this much is expected since it's the closest port to Orazon. Ships leaving here continue westward, passing by Amgul to Danri. Some may even go further toward the western continent. Speaking of which, Basan remembers this is the same continent Owen is said to have gone to, but he's not sure if it even exists. Tion fills him in that many ships head that way and don't return, but the place definitely exists. Basan wonders why merchants don't cross to that continent and start trade there. There might be dangers, but it could also be profitable, though he isn't sure if merchants would risk it. Tioni believes merchants will go anywhere if the danger is worth facing. There are pirate-infested rocks, areas with no wind or high waves, not to mention the threat of sea monsters and storms too. So that definitely doesn't sound enticing to anyone at all. Since she's got some trades to do, she suggests Basan rest here while she's off on business. He also has the option to explore the place, but he must return by the promised time. Sounds like good news to Basan. After all, they had been cooped up on that boat forever. So a little walk to revitalize his spirit won't hurt, or will it? And so he sets off to stroll around. He sees different people doing various things and meets some peddlers trying to sell their goods. While doing this, he's also keeping an eye out for any surveillors. At one point, he finds a peddler selling goods from Hukrin. The merchant happily highlights how they receive a lot of items from there. Noticing Basan just arrived on the ship that docked at the port, the peddler warns that if they plan to return to Hukrin after trading, they should pray to their god they don't meet any pirates. There's a group controlling the Bavrin area, usually targeting ships ready to leave. They're known as the Deep Night Pirates. Later, Basan asks Tion about this group, but she doesn't seem to have any clue. If anything, there might be new pirates who suddenly appeared, hyped up by port merchants for no reason. As she checks the list of items she intends to bring back, she realizes some won't be available until tomorrow. Contrary to what Basan thought, she decides to leave instead of staying. The rest of the warships will bring the rest of the supplies. If the warships stayed behind, Basan fears they wouldn't have their protection. But she reminds him there's a lot of cargo to unload and provisions to load at Sasin. Time spent on the boat is all money, especially for water, food, and crew salaries. At this point, Basan is praying they just don't run into pirates, which causes Tion to burst into hearty laughter seeing him so fearful. She assures him they've never once met pirates during their voyages, or so it was until now. The moment they sail out, they spot pirates heading their way. Of course, she's exasperated. To outmaneuver the pirates, she orders the crew to lighten the ship. They start dumping sandbags, food, and water into the sea, while everyone arms themselves with any weapons they can find. Basin doubts they can outrun these guys. Pirates usually use merchant ships made with comparatively lighter wood and large sails for better wind. These pirate ships have similar builds, and worse, they usually travel with barely any cargo on board. In simpler terms, outrunning them won't be easy. The pirates are closing in every moment. Their only option is to throw away everything they can, starting with cornerstones. But Tion refuses to throw those away. Hell, she'd rather jump overboard herself than throw away the cornerstones. Now that they're about to be caught, Basan decides to buy time until their warships arrive. He's heard additional cornerstones will arrive in the morning, meaning the warships could catch up in half a day if they're lucky. To rub salt in the wound, there's literally no wind blowing. Tion clasps her hands, bends her knees, and starts praying. She also orders Basan to join her. The enemy is almost on their necks. The pirates are rejoicing that the targeted ship is moving slowly, meaning it's stacked with treasure to loot. They're about to snag a big haul, thanks to their prayers to the white spider god. Our team is ready to unleash a barrage of arrows to keep the enemy from getting closer. Meanwhile, Basan realizes these guys follow the white spider god, a name he's heard before. With one precise arrow, he takes down a foe right in front of him, then another. Basan notices their ship has a strategic advantage. It's quite a bit bigger than the enemy's ships. That makes it difficult for the pirates to aim and lock on targets. Not to mention, they still have one ace up their sleeve. The hobos don't realize the doom awaiting them and throw grappling hooks to board the ship. As soon as they advance, they're met by a towering presence ready to strike the first pirate and take down the others. This towering figure is Matey, of course, more than ready to strike the heck out of those guys. With no time wasted, he blows off all the jackasses. The presence of an ogre might alarm these robbers, but their leader assures them Matey isn't a combatant, he's just a crewman. So if they take down the ogre, there'll be no one to stop them. Everyone directs their barrage of arrows toward the big guy. As tough as Matey is, he starts crying like a scared little kid, even though he's sturdy enough to bounce off those arrows like he's made of steel. Even Basan has no clue what kind of nonsense this is. He turns to Tion, asking why this dude is acting like a whiny baby. She reminds him Matey just got hurt, so his reaction is expected. But of course everyone saw those arrows bounce off. Ogres are just built different, so how come? Tion reminds him again that ogres are people too. While Matey might be whining more than necessary, with the size he's got, why would he be on this ship if he was truly free-spirited? He would have been a general somewhere instead. Guess there's no helping it. Basan equips himself with bow and arrows and decides to fight these bastards as much as he can. Meanwhile, he suggests Tion comfort Matey and buy some time. But Tion has problems with this plan for obvious reasons. If Basan gets injured, it'll be on her head. And she isn't interested in losing her head. Then again, they're not safe on the ship either if the pirates overwhelm them. Basan believes fighting is better than doing nothing. She then reminds him of his title. If he flaunts his title as a Prince of Hukrin, his life will be spared since the pirates aren't dumb enough to anger an entire nation. She might have a point, but he isn't willing to abandon everyone. Before the rest of the pirate ships catch up and overwhelm them by boarding from the other side, he has to think of something. Even if Matey is an ogre, he can't handle so many pirates, especially if he's a scaredy cat. They need to defeat one side before the others join. She continues to protest his plan, while he sticks to his guns. The only way they have a chance is if she pulls Matey out of his emotional funk. Out of frustration, she lashes out at Matey, reminding him of his dream to conquer the ocean. And now, he's chickening out over a few pirates. The poor guy seems too traumatized by those harmless arrows to even move. Meanwhile, our boy sneaks around, keeping a close eye on the enemy. Everyone's distracted by Matey. He has the perfect opportunity to surprise these bastards, but the thudding sound of his jumps is sure to grab attention. What is Matey even doing? Turns out, Matey has finally gotten his fighting spirit back, and is ready to demolish the enemy by throwing barrels at ballistic speed. Just as Matey throws a barrel at full speed, Basan jumps off to match the impact. The barrel lands, quickly erupting and flooding the deck. The pirates scramble out of the way as if poison was thrown at them. The one encouraging his buddies to stand gets sneaked up on from behind like a ninja on a mission. Meanwhile, Matey doesn't hold back. He picks up the pace, throwing more barrels. Shrimp Pirate Boss suggests shooting arrows at Matey to scare him off, like before. The barrels filled with water run over the enemy deck with hard impacts. With no choice, Shrimp decides to climb the ropes himself to get to the other side. But his plan fails as Basan is already upon him, having defeated all the other pirates. With all those bastards down, my guy suggests this sea dweller surrender. The crabby guy is surprised and blown away that a normal merchant ship has a warrior like Basan. But then again, Basan had the advantage of sneaking up from behind. Otherwise, in a 1v1 fight, he wouldn't stand a chance. He's pretty sure he can fight Basan, since Basan probably hasn't fought anyone of his species before. This bastard seems to forget the biggest variable of the equation. Of course, it's Matey throwing barrels without fear. In no time, Matey overwhelms the crabby pirate, crushing him under another barrel punch. Bro looks totally hyped after getting motivation from Tion. This time he's ready to conquer the ocean for real. A little while later, the crabby pirate leader begins regaining consciousness. He hears Basan and Tion talking about how lizardmen often call Astasidians crawfish. This prompts Tion to ask what they call a real crawfish. Basin gives the most appropriate answer: edible crawfish. Tioni is sure that this guy is going to hate the lizardmen if he finds out. The pirate wakes up yelling, demanding to know where his ship is. Tioni breaks the bad news upon him that it's currently under her subordinate's command, following them closely behind. As for the other two ships, those losers ran away without even trying to fight. The pirate refuses to believe it. But well, this is the harsh truth he has to swallow. As soon as the other pirates saw they were losing, with the arrival of the naval ships, they scrambled to flee. The pirate is still in disbelief that his brothers abandoned him. Regardless, he gets all cute and chummy, begging to be spared. He even promises to drop all his shady business and live clean from now on. Tioni doesn't have such noble intentions, given what this bastard did to them. If anything, he should be grateful he hasn't been thrown into the sea, as she intends to have him punished under Hukrin law. Basan steps forward to strike up some negotiations. The only thing Basan wants is a few answers to the daunting questions he's about to ask. It's fine if he doesn't get any answers. Since the pirate has no chance of survival other than this, he agrees to answer anything. Basan's first question: if Astasidians can travel through the sea on their own, why use a boat? Seriously, this isn't the kind of question anyone expected Basan to ask. Even the pirate is bewildered by what the hell this guy is asking, out of all the things he could have. Basan notices Tion glaring at him with a disgusted look, prompting him to admit he's always been curious. The pirate finally responds, reminding them that swimming takes a toll on the body, while traveling by ship is easier and less tiring. Not to mention, they can't carry cargo without a ship. With his curious mind satisfied, Basan proceeds to the next question, a serious one. He wants to know where the religion of the white spider god comes from and what kind of god the white spider is. The pirate reveals this religion is widely followed where he's from. There's an island where Astasidians live, south of Hukrin, accessible only by boat. The place has multiple islands, each with a different name. But in Hukrin, they generalize all the islands as the Southern Archipelago. After learning a bit about the geography, Basan insists on more details about the white spider god. Turns out, the white spider god appeared as a huge white spider 100 years ago. At that time, the white spider god saved the chief from a three-tailed snake and created shrimp on land when their tribe was starving. These miracles appeared throughout the islands, and some islands call the white spider god by different names. For example, at the northernmost island closest to Hukrin, some call him the blue insect god. This revelation makes Basan crack a big smile. After all, the blue insect god was the old name of their night sky god. This clearly means the shrimp also have faith in the same god as Hukrin. Since the place where these shrimp lives is far and secluded, Hukrin never had to interact with these guys on religious grounds. This is why this shrimp seems to be unknown of Hukrin's god. However, Basan doesn't like that pirates are working while calling the night sky god by another name. It's an offense Rakrak wouldn't forgive. He seriously wants to know if the entire tribe of this shrimp is acting as pirates. The scared shrimp quickly scrambles to say no. As far as he knows, the other Astasidians are living normally in the southern archipelago. He got captured by some pirates when he was young, and those pirates were abandoned by the Deep Night pirates. In short, the one named Deep Night from the Deep Night pirates isn't from the southern archipelago. They completely belong to some other continent. Basan guesses it's probably from the western continent actually, the only other continent they're aware of. Shrimp responds with a no to that assumption. He's heard that the Deep Night pirates are from the southern continent. The mention of the southern continent perks our duo up for obvious reasons, and we promptly cut to the southern archipelago. There, in one of the tunnels, we see Nebula. He's actually holding a meeting with other gods. Wisdom is rather surprised to be contacted for the first time by Nebula. What's more, it's an emergency call from a southern island in Hukrin. Rather interesting choice of location. Nebula finally reveals the reason he made this call. A fourth continent has been discovered. Of course, this shocks the hell out of everyone. The only person who isn't very surprised is Krampus, which likely means this dude already had some sort of intel on the matter. Well, he doesn't hesitate before confirming it. As far as he knows, a group called Deep Night Pirates has been active in the south lately. The pirate named Deep Night is apparently not from the eastern or western continents, but from the southern continent. But since there was no solid evidence, Krampus isn't sure if there really is a new continent. So he questions Nebula why he thinks this continent exists. Well, Nebula isn't sure either. He just came down here after hearing that info. It's the area where the crawfish live, but he hadn't focused on them for a few years, and during that time, they were conquered by those Deep Night Pirates. The damage isn't huge, but they're paying tribute to those bastards periodically. Wisdom then adds that Asticideans tend to exaggerate things, so it's possible they mistook a big island in the southern hemisphere for a continent. Nebula agrees to this, though the island in the southern archipelago can't be considered small. It's a fleet that can control the entire archipelago, so they have quite a size. If those pirates originated from an island, it would be difficult to build such a big fleet. There's a limit when it comes to tech development and population, so Nebula doesn't think that's likely. While Wisdom admits that the news Nebula brings is definitely a big deal, he isn't sure if it's alarming enough to warrant an emergency call. The last time they had a meeting, they promised they'd only use emergency calls when the situation involved unknown players with the glitchy nickname. Nebula knows this well too, and that's exactly why he used an emergency call. In a nutshell, there's a continent behind the Deep Night Pirates, and a player with a glitchy nickname is there as well, and Nebula is absolutely certain of it. This means another evil god has appeared, just like the god of the vampires did. Let's add some context regarding the history every god present here shares with each other. After the battle with the vampires, new terms of agreement were formed among the gods of the third continent. The most important one was about players with glitchy nicknames. The previous vampire guy they defeated, who everyone dubbed Geol Wooby, is just an example of how catastrophic these glitchy nickname players can be. Currently, Hegemonia is prowling the western continent trying to gather related information. According to him, on the first continent, aka the western continent, there was a species called werewolves. There was also another player with a glitchy nickname, and the werewolf species, similar to vampires, spread through a contagious disease. But the difference was that only humans, elves, dwarves, and other vaguely human-type species could become werewolves. Other than that, there was the fact that they were weak to silver, and they later grew stronger by transforming and weren't affected by the sun. So in some ways, they were better than vampires. But thankfully, that vaguely human-type species wasn't the main species in the West, so they were defeated without much trouble. According to the game's setting, everyone had deduced that these evil gods might be connected to the ancient evil. There was also an important analysis everyone did back then. Other than those who gave up, when the game began, there were 27 players. But after sending inquiries to players on other continents, these were the results. The first continent, Ebon, has 10 active players. The second continent, Sharnaf, has 8 active players. As for the third continent, Grand Sidiac, there are 11 players. That makes a total of 29 players. The numbers just don't add up. For example, in Grand Sidiac, where Nebula and his fellow gods are located, there are only 11 confirmed players. The total 29 includes Geol Wooby and the werewolf guy, meaning players were added after the game began. This likely means the player behind the Deep Night Pirates has a glitchy nickname and was added after the game started. If that's the case, Krampus should have noticed it too. If he came into contact with another player, they pop up in the local player log after all. Krampus reveals that the person he met was part of an affiliated pirate group to the Deep Night Pirates, and the leaders were mostly Asticideans too. He didn't get the chance to meet those guys directly. Since Nebula is so confident about his claims, AR is sure he must have other evidence to validate the existence of another god's involvement. Nebula doesn't hesitate before confirming this. When he interacted with that new force back then, a message popped up before him. It read, "Clash of Civilizations. The opposing tribe possesses faith." This is evidence that the opponent is a player. Furthermore, Nebula shows the glitchy name that popped up in the local player log. Wisdom recognizes some of the symbols, and one of them is even pronounced Sha. In this case, Nebula decides to call this unknown player Sha-Cha. By now, Zhang is certain there's indeed an evil god among them, given this spooky name. Now they gotta figure out the species this god rules over. Seems like Nebula has already seen that species, and he's ready to show it. Runda is shocked when she sees the giant monster behind Nebula. Turns out this monster is just Nebula's pet, a giant white spider. Nebula calls it Hylov, and gives the crawler props for a job well done. The spider feels honored to work for Nebula, indicating it's very, very loyal to him. Well, that much is expected since it's Nebula's creation, known as Hylov. Finally, Nebula shows the species that unknown player Sha-Cha controls. Both Runda and Krampus have awe-induced reactions. The creature before them isn't a mermaid but a merman. The species name is Deep One. Hearing this, Eldar's mind perks up with another term, namely, dragon or Cthulhu. It's actually a reference from Lovecraft's work. While Nebula thinks referencing some random fiction isn't necessary in their current situation, Eldar firmly believes it's an important bit to take note of. You see, the traits of the vampires they faced are quite well known generally, just like how the first continent's werewolves are similar to legends on Earth. What Eldar is saying is that species names aren't just random, the names are hints about their traits. The reason behind this is likely because this world is heavily influenced by Earth civilization, or perhaps Earth has been influenced by this game world. But this is just a theory. Since Eldar seems to know a lot about the Deep Ones, Nebula insists he reveal all the juicy bits. Well, apparently, the Deep Ones first appeared in H.P., Lovecraft's short story known as The Dragon. Their abilities were revealed in the shadow over Innsmouth. The crucial detail to note here is that these creatures live underwater, and if you interact with or get cursed by a Deep One, you can transform into one. I know it sounds crazy, just by interacting, you can turn into one. Krampus asks if they get infected like vampires or werewolves. Eldar responds with no. To be exact, one's blood needs to mix, so transformation happens through reproduction. They serve an ancient god like a dragon or Cthulhu, and they live in hiding to avoid being discovered. In the novel, the protagonist visits a village that appears normal, but it turns out to be a village of Deep Ones pretending to be humans. In other words, they might appear human, but resemble fish. According to Eldar, Deep Ones may invade villages and act like normal citizens, and nobody would even know. If a player doesn't realize it, the Clash of Civilizations event won't even pop up. Their specialty is living near the ocean, and they can't stray too far from it. After hearing all this, Nebula decides everyone should investigate their respective oceanside areas. Before dismissing the meeting, Wisdom expresses a desire to talk about something. It's about the limited number of players who can participate in this game. It's common knowledge that the capped number of players for the perished world is 32. The cap for this game is 32, and 27 came from Earth. 2 new players appeared and were eliminated, while a third has appeared. This means that other than Cha-Cha, 2 more are yet to appear. Or perhaps they've already appeared, and nobody is aware of it. There's a possibility they exist in the new 4th continent they just discovered. If it's truly a continent, it must be quite big. But right now they can't tell. The continent might already have gathered some power, or maybe an alliance has formed. If so, it would be good to have a temporary alliance among everyone present at the meeting. Well, Nebula clearly isn't vibing with this idea. Although no one knows the exact location of the southern continent, it's probably closest to Hukrin. Who knows what kind of chaotic and messy actions others might take in the name of alliance. This internal conflict could cause everyone's downfall. Krampus accuses Nebula of harboring intentions to defeat Cha-Cha alone and manipulate and develop the new continent, however he sees fit. While this isn't exactly Nebula's ulterior motive, he agrees that his decision against forming an alliance is biased. Since there's no changing Nebula's mind, Zhang decides to let Nebula stand on the front lines alone and deal with the mess. AR shares the same thought but is willing to help whenever Nebula needs it. Since Krampus is closer to Hukrin, and damage caused by pirates might reach his territory, he too requires help from others along the way. With that, the meeting concludes. Nebula will be fighting this unknown species alone. Since Hegemonia is in a full-scale battle on another continent, Nebula tasks Zhang with delivering the contents of this meeting, since Zhang lives closer to Hegemonia. With that, everyone disperses. Nebula then reflects on everyone's tone, how they were ready to let him fight alone, though no one explicitly said they wouldn't intervene. This clearly indicates everyone will try their best to claim this new continent for themselves. Nebula reveals this to Runda, who finds it hard to believe. From what she's heard, she thinks no one really cares about it. But our boy doesn't think that's the case. He highlights everyone's words. No one said they would refrain from intervening. Krampus even said he wants help from others, which clearly means he wants to collaborate to intervene. They're basically warning Nebula politely, and Nebula is sure the others are weighing the profitability and planning right now. Additionally, Krampus is probably already talking to those players. Eldar isn't sure how Nebula will handle this unknown enemy with unknown strength. It was brutal fighting those vampires as it was. Nebula claims the situation is different from back then with Jiel Wubi. The players are ready this time so they won't be tricked as easily. And the enemy forces are currently just at the level of pirates. It's an enemy he can likely handle, although no one knows how many there are. But then again, it's not like he had been fooling around for 100 years. In addition, Nebula points out the top 2 weapons they can now use. They'll be appearing soon enough in the game. Of course, it's mages and gunpowder. If he can acquire gunpowder and the enemy can't, victory is within grasp. This is exactly why Nebula intends to handle the enemy himself. From other players' perspectives, Hukrin's southern islands are bridgeheads to the fourth continent, and the same applies to Shacha and the Deep Night pirates. Other players will try to fight to ensure he can't monopolize it. Runda finds it absurd that other players would attack him without evidence. Nebula reminds her they can forge evidence. For example, they might attack under the excuse of needing to recover the southern archipelago from the Deep Night pirates. If that happens, it would lead to a result similar to an alliance. Basically, everyone will end up fighting each other, and Nebula is too well aware of it. The land has merely changed to sea, and there's the added variable named Shacha. Either way, fights will break out since gunpowder has been invented. The fight against this evil god will include Krampus, another player, Shacha, while Nebula, Runda, and Eldar are on one side. It will be a three-way fight. With this formation, there will definitely be naval warfare. We then cut to Hukrin, where a minister rushes to meet Kyle. It's actually Priest Suhang. He's here to deliver a revelation from the Revelation Priest. The revelation was supposed to be delivered immediately, so this guy came rushing here. Since it's the Revelation Priest who sent the message, it clearly means their god has given his word. When Kyle reads it, he immediately wants to meet the administration minister. When the man arrives, Kyle expresses his desire to issue a royal command. He wants the minister to inform all government offices near the coast that if there are villages, groups, or people who communicate with pirates, as well as any species resembling fish, they should block or detain them. The priest knew a battle would occur in the distant future, but to think it would be like this. A new demonic king is on the horizon, even though this era was supposed to be one of peace. While Kyle is a little wary of the chaos, he believes they shouldn't worry excessively. Back to the main point. Currently, Hukrin's soldiers are no longer the same warriors from 100 years ago. Most believed Hukrin being a great nation was a given and looked down on other nations. A part of the long peace has now poisoned Hukrin. Just because there's poison doesn't mean everyone drank from the same cup. At least, that's what Kyle believes. Although the new demonic king who appeared in the south is definitely worrisome, there were already several signs pointing to a potential war. This might actually be good. If it weren't for the demonic king, Kyle wouldn't know where the war would break out or what to watch for. However, the focus is now clear. The problem is they've only made preparations to fight up north, and a battle in the Southern Ocean is something they haven't prepared for. While it's true that Hukrin's ships are still better than Danyam's or Amgul's, they aren't as good as Danry's. Luckily, Danry is on the way to the western continent, so Kyle doesn't think they'll intervene here. But other than Danry, if the other 5 nations all try to go to war with Hukrin, Hukrin will be at a numerical disadvantage. Kyle has already thought of a solution. By now, Ravina should have reached Sajan. The priest isn't sure if that alchemist's wicked knowledge can help save the world. Though he makes one thing clear, he doesn't despise alchemists. After all, everything is according to the night sky's will. Even if an alchemist is part of it, he has no objections. This is when Kyle drops something very interesting, something only he knows. Turns out, Ravina is the closest person to a mage on this continent. The fact that she survived the journey here from the alchemy tower is living proof. There will definitely be an order regarding when each nation obtains gunpowder, but it will eventually reach everyone. However, as for mages, the results of this war will largely depend on which nation they belong to and what they do. In the thick woods of the snowy mountains, we meet an eagle-like humanoid creature. Tagging along with him is a weird, creepy monster who claims to be a spirit. It seems this eagle guy and the spirit aren't exactly on friendly terms. According to his studies, this spirit-like monster is a mere pawn who served an ancient evil. The spirit constantly brags about his own prowess, suggesting that this eagle is no good without his powers. He also mocks how the eagle dude got a pair of wings, which are practically useless. Turns out this eagle-like guy is a rare species known as Garudas. As far as the spirit is concerned, this is why Siakmian's god chose trolls as rulers and utilized this eagle-like species as mere pawns. After placing them as a meat shield at the front in war, the Garduas lost their numbers and the god heartlessly abandoned them. The spirit further rubs salt in the wound by reminding this eagle that if Garudas had been chosen by any god, their fate would have been completely different. But this eagle fella tells the spirit to shut the hell up. He doesn't need a god to begin with. According to stories about Garudas, in the distant past, they were called the species of emperors and could soar the skies. Even during the ancient evil, the Garudas were an honorable species and did their best to fight as was natural. However, when the battle became unfavorable, the gods ran away. After that, for some reason, Garudas could no longer fly. There was an ancient story like that. What this guy is sure about, both in reality and legends, is that gods cannot be trusted. Neither does he need gods nor their help. He will fly the skies using his own abilities, or at least that's how this guy thinks. Once he gets out of this forest, he'll reach a river, and he's almost there. Soon enough, he finds the frozen river. Since elk knights can cross this river and continue to chase him down, the eagle decides to melt the river so no one can follow him. though that spirit thinks this eagle doesn't have enough power to pull off something like that. Suddenly, his path is blocked by big tusked guys, trolls of course. They immediately notice his rotten left hand, a dead giveaway that this bastard is Mazdari. Mazdari, however, is surprised to see them here because the people chasing him were supposed to come from behind. Everyone seems to be after him because of the knowledge he's carrying. So Mazdari feigns ignorance and pretends to panic, acting like he has no clue who Mazdari even is. He introduces himself as Yehuran, someone who grew up in a Garuda clan village. He claims his left arm looks like that because he caught fire when he was younger, not because it's rotten. The trolls can clearly see there's no burn scar. The eagle guy argues that burn scars and rotten flesh look different, just like trolls and Garudas look different. He then tries to divert their attention by asking if they're looking for a Garuda named Mazdari. They respond yes. They're sure even a lowly runt like him must know about the alchemy tower. The eagle guy admits he knows every detail about the alchemy tower beyond the Sky Mountains. It's the place of those frauds called alchemists who live there. The troll claims that his knights have completely cornered the tower, but some alchemists have disappeared. Now, under His Majesty's orders, he's trying to track down those escaped alchemists to stop them from spreading their evil knowledge. The eagle guy assures them they'll be able to find that Garuda alchemist, especially since there aren't many Garudas around here. He even promises to inform them if he finds any Garuda alchemist nearby. But the Tusk guys tell him to come closer, as they won't let him go until they confirm he's not an alchemist. With no options, the guy raises his hand in surrender, ready to be searched. Next, they ask him to pass over his bag. That's the turning point. Mazdari snaps since his identity will be out anyway. The Tusk guys retaliate after sensing his hostility. Mazdari grabs one of the potions and throws it right into a bastard's eyes, causing his entire face to burn and melt like candle wax. Word quickly spreads that the guy with the rotten hand is here, and soon the trackers following him catch up. Mazdari has only 1 sulfuric acid, 1 smoke screen, and 2 gas bombs left. If he uses them now, there will be nothing left to melt the river, but there's no helping it. He throws the potions right at their faces. One Tusk guy blocks the liquid thrown at him, but it's liquefied gas, which Mazdari ignites with his fire, burning the bastard to a crisp. They scream in agony, getting cooked alive. Their leader turns on his heels and rides off on their beasts. Mazdari doesn't want these guys to escape like that. He has to kill them all no matter what. Unfortunately, his flames won't reach that far because he refuses to rely on the spirit following him. Soon enough, the big shot of those Tusk guys arrives, very glad to have found Mazdari. Mazdari is ordered to undo his waistband and put down his things. It goes without saying Mazdari can't fight them like this, and the spirit shares the same thought. So the eagle guy makes a wise decision and surrenders immediately. He's forced to strip his bag off, and the Tusks chain his hands behind his back. Mazdari makes it clear that even without his alchemy gear, he's still a dangerous guy. But the big guy isn't fazed. After all, he's Sokmian's king, Dermalin Busa, the one their god, Twisted Tai, has chosen. Dermalin has heard that alchemists always want to compete against gods. He's torn whether Mazdari should be burned to a crisp or punished by the god's will. If Mazdari wants to witness the troll god's might, Dermalin is ready to show him. The spirit is hyped up about challenging God's might and supports Dermalin's suggestion. But Mazdari knows their God is watching this place. If the God is watching, his judgment would be swift. If Mazdari receives the judgment of Twisted Tai, the tangled and entwined God, he'd be split into a dozen pieces instantly. Mazdari has no clue why, out of all the alchemists, he's being personally pursued by a king. After all, Dermalin had neglected the alchemy tower until now. Well, Dermalin has a clear idea of how the alchemists have been trying to hide their knowledge. The only reason they neglected the tower was because the god never wanted to interrupt their research until now. He was waiting for this knowledge to mature all along. Alchemists might be non-believers, but that doesn't change the fact that they make absolutely mind-boggling stuff. Cutting to the chase, Mazdari is willing to teach the king how to create gunpowder, if they let him go in return. However, it doesn't seem like gunpowder is the only thing the king wants from him. Mazdari might not be aware, but there was an alchemist inside the tower who was communicating with Dermalin. So Dermalin already knows the method to create gunpowder. By now, Mazdari has no clue what exactly these guys want from him. Finally, the king breaks it down. His god wants magic. The brave eagle tries to smack some sense into this overgrown animal. They can't just obtain magic because they want it. The bastard claims it's not about obtaining magic, nor is he curious about Mazdari's identity. He just needs power. According to his insider, magic is a power that can alter the order of this world, just like a god can. Mazdari argues it's nothing more than myth, ancient stories buried deep in history. But the big bastard remains persistent. It's then that the eagle finally recognizes these guys don't want magic, they want a mage. A mage who will submit to their orders. Dermalin is glad Mazdari is smart enough to understand this, which spares him the explanation. The other alchemist, meanwhile, wasn't so smart. That boy didn't reveal anything except that the best alchemist there is Mazdari. Finally, the eagle guy understands these bastards want him to become a mage. The king is willing to give Mazdari all the knowledge collected from mages so far. If Mazdari absorbs all that lore, he can become a mage with that power. With that indomitable power,